Washington Black is the third novel from Canadian author Ezia Dujan. This book has been shortlisted for the Man Booker. It won the Giller Prize here in Canada. This is Ezia Dujan's second time winning the prize, and it topped a ton of critics' year-end best-of lists. It was also a December pick for a Discord book club, which saw its largest showing ever to discuss this book. So, Washington Black is basically about George Washington Black. When the book opens, he's an 11-year-old slave in Faith Plantation in Barbados. The year is 1830, and he's introduced to the new slave master, Erasmus Wild, and Washington intuits almost immediately that in Erasmus is someone who owned their lives as well as their deaths, and it's something that Erasmus liked far too much. But shortly after, he's introduced to Erasmus's brother, Christopher Wilde, otherwise known as Titch. Now, Titch takes an interest in Wash and changes the trajectory of his life. They get on a hot air balloon, hijinks ensue, they end up traveling the world, and there's your story. But is it worth all the hype? On the chat, a quarter of us loved it, thought it was the best of the book, entirely readable, super enjoyable. The rest of us liked it well enough, but it could hardly live up to the expectations sort of weighted on it. I myself fall in that camp. It's a 4, but veering very close to a 3. Again, hardly able to live up to the expectations I had going in. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Tell me I'm wrong. All right, I've talked enough about the book, and most of you by now have probably noped out of the video. Reviews tend to not get viewed as much anyway, but I still have questions. And so let's have a full-on spoilery discussion about Washington Black. If you've read it, I'd love to hear your feedback below because I do have questions. And I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but for a lot of you, many of you are precious about your spoilery discussion. So yes, back away from this video now. Frankly, I don't think knowing the different plot points should diminish your reading of the book. I think it should better inform it, but whatever, you do you. You live your life the way you want. But let's really dive in and talk a little bit about the book. All right, let's start this spoiler discussion by going right to the end so you can explain what the hell is going on with this ending. Wash just disappears in this Moroccan sandstorm, and that is such an extra emo thing to do and end it on. So what are we supposed to make of that? Is he just ghosting Ontana? Is he sort of disappearing and starting his life anew? It mirrors what exactly Titch did in the Arctic. Or forget about making excuses or explanations. Just sever all ties, nope out of your life, and start anew. Or is he walking to his own death, personal obliteration, this sort of hardcore commitment to the idea? Or more likely, is it just a baptism by sand, signifying that he can look to the future with fresh eyes and live truly as a free man, freed from his past? I don't know. But all this brings to mind one of the themes I've been wrestling with the book. This have-to-form idea that I'd love to sort of trot out here and see if you can help me out with. All right, high school essay time. Washington Black is a very, very good book. Now, I grew up in a time where we used to write our high school essays on lined foolscap, so you tighten up the margins, write as big as you possibly can without making it obvious, and adjectives are your friend. Washington Black is a very, very good book written by 2-time Giller Prize winner Ezia Dujan. Boom, 2 more lines taken up right there. One of the notions that she explores in the book is, and here's this idea that I'm trying to explore, is that in death, there is freedom. All right, so thesis statement out of the way. It's time to back this shit up. Right at the beginning of the novel, we're introduced to the notion of death as a means of escape. For Big Kit, death is a doorway, and in death, they will return to their homelands, into Homie. They will be free. And of course, later on in the novel, we learn that Big Kit is in fact Wash's mother. Now, Titch is clearly the father figure in this story, and if in the ending we believe that Wash is simply disappearing and ghosting out of his life, he simply becomes the 3rd generation of Wash men to choose death as a means towards freedom. I mean, James Wilde Sr., believed dead, but frankly up in the Arctic, continuing his little experiments. And really, when he's found out, he's not in a big hurry to disabuse anyone of that notion. It's not like he tells his wife or his kids. He's just happy and content to carry out his experiments. And then we have Titch, who nopes out on Wash in the middle of the Arctic, and he's lost. He's left for dead. And then there's this weird talk about him occupying this second realm, that he watches along as the search party is out there looking for him, and that he is at his father's bedside when he dies, despite not being seen by anybody else at the camp. And it's this weird bit of magical realism and a lot of hand-wavy sort of explanation that made me think that perhaps death is a bigger part of the story than we'd think. Otherwise, why have this aspect in there at all? So in the ending, we can interpret it as Wash is the son of Big Kit, dying to escape, to find freedom. Or Wash is simply the third generation of Titch men ghosting, using death as a means to escape from their responsibilities and live a life of the mind. Of course, there is a third explanation, which is Wash simply turns around, slams the door, and says, "How about that weather? What I wouldn't do for a bowl of couscous." But that really isn't the same sort of emo extra ending that Adoujin was probably hoping for. All right, so just as there are three possible interpretations to the ending, there are three equally unique and oblique covers to the book itself. Now, my favorite of the three is the American edition, two black silhouettes on this field of white, and it's clearly Washington and Titch in the Arctic, just before Titch disappears on Wash. And it happens in the middle of the book, and I can't help but keep sort of turning it over in my head. What exactly is he doing there? I mean, he is in the middle of Arctic. He's not walking back to the outpost on his own. Does he have a dog team just hidden around the corner? Does he have someone that he's paid off to meet at a predetermined location to take him home? I mean, this seems like a lot of extra effort just to ghost on Washington. And it really calls into question his motives towards Washington and the relationship the two of them shared, that he would go to these lengths to disappear on him. And then we have the UK cover, which features an artist's imagining of the cloud cutter. And it's such a steampunky sort of contraption, complete with sky oars. And this is selling a completely different book entirely. I keep expecting a Jules Verne type adventure, and I was waiting for the submarine to appear in the third act of the novel. And it's such a weird thing to fixate on, because no sooner does the cloud cutter appear, get into the sky, that it conveniently crashes into the mast of a ship headed towards Virginia. And then we have what I think is the prettiest of the three covers, the Canadian edition featuring an octopus. And again, the octopus doesn't play a huge part in the story, but it is important. We have this octopus capture that's going to be part of the display for the aquarium that Washington is putting together. But in captivity, it starts to lose color, languish, and get to a near-death state. And I guess this is mirroring Wash's confinement at Faith Plantation. But ironically, Washington is the one that's actually captured the octopus in the first place. The idea is to show that this creature, once envisioned as something nightmarish, is in fact something of beauty. And at the end, we're never really sure what happens to the octopus. Does it die in captivity, or is it released back into the ocean? We never do find out. All right, enough with the analysis. Anyway, my biggest problem with this story is that it feels more like a plot-driven story. It is Wash jumping from improbable situation to improbable situation. We have the hot air balloon escape in the middle of the night, and they manage to thread the needle and, of course, crash land on a ship headed towards Virginia. And instead of being thrown overboard for breaking the mast, they're taken on by the kind-hearted captain and his brother. They end up in Virginia, head on up to the Arctic, and of course there, manage to find the sole person that can actually navigate the barren tundra, take them to James Wilde. And then we have, of course, Titch ghosting on Wash. Wash goes to Nova Scotia and runs into the biracial manic pixie dream girl, Tana, who of course happens to be the daughter of G.M. Goff, whose illustrations of marine biology Washington is obsessed over as a child. So they take him along with them to London, where they start an aquarium of Wash's design. Of course, conveniently, there's a two-headed porpoise in Amsterdam that they go off to, find the one man that gives them a clue to where Titch might be. So then they end up at Marrakesh, Morocco, in the busy market, run into the one man that can get them to Titch. And it's just one improbable coincidence after another, and it got to be a little much, frankly. I also admit I was expecting more from the writing, but I was starting to get a little tired at the beginning. I mean, I get it. You're writing in the mind of an 11-year-old slave, but everything is absolutely terrifying, and everything smells like paper and stone. Now, occasionally the writing does dazzle, but more often than not, it felt like merely getting Wash from one point to the next. All right, so last little bit here. Is Titch white knighting, or is he in fact an ally to Wash? Now, early on, we hear that Titch refuses to have sugar in any of his food, will not have it in his larder. He insists on extravagant spices and cooking in the French style, but no sugar should ever appear in his food, because far be it from him to actually use a product that his family employs slaves to harvest. And okay, I guess that's your line in the sand. No sugar tonight in my coffee, no sugar tonight in my tea. But exactly who is funding your white guy pursuit of building a Zeppelin? I mean, is there any more a white guy pursuit than to try and build this dirigible? And who's exactly carting all the parts up to the side of the mountain so you can have this cloud cutter? Whose efforts and work makes his life of the mind and pursuit of odd scientific things possible? Or is Tanner right? Is Washington nothing more than a cause, a way to further Titch's crusade in his own sense of goodness? Washington is a signifier, something like a pawn between the two brothers. Erasmus sees him simply as a slave. He is the thing that makes their lives possible. He needs to make that clear to Titch. And for Titch, it's a way of absolving his own guilt. But Washington is only useful, and he's never considered an equal. And then we have Tana's father. Washington realizes that his name may never be attached to Ocean House, despite the fact that it's his idea and his science behind it. Goff, as the white man, is the one that can secure the funding and make the whole thing possible. And he himself is looking to make a late in his life sensation, to become relevant again. And Washington realizes he's once again been relegated to the side. He's useful, but is he an equal? Anyway, all of this stuff swimming around, and I think all these questions that the book raises is what keeps it in the 4 range instead of dipping down into the 3. And maybe that is why the smarter of us in the Discord like it a lot more than I do, because they were able to pick apart these different ideas. Anyway, this is a weird sort of bookie review. I've never really done a spoilery one before. I'll be surprised if any of you made it this far along, but I just thought I'd try it out and wrestle with this, because it is one of those interesting books where you can wrestle with a lot of these different ideas. That is it for me this week. I hope you all have a great week of reading, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.